Jennifer Howe of the National Post writes in a June 22, 2014 article, "It is estimated that between 2,000 and 5,000 war criminals fled to Canada after the Second World War, but not one Nazi has ever been successfully prosecuted in this country." She says a key problem was that for decades, Canada did not actively pursue suspected war criminals. And when it did decide to launch proceedings, they were done badly and ineffectively. Apparently, the view of the day was to dispose of the past as soon as possible. Several of those war criminals who were prosecuted had their cases acquitted for a variety of reasons, but under mounting pressures from the Jewish community, as the decades slipped by, our government under Brian Mulroney agreed to strip Nazi war criminals of their citizenship and order them deported. Of these, 2 men were extradited and 5 deported. Many died from old age and natural causes before their cases could be heard. A U.S. private investigator by the name of Mr. Rambam asserts that scores of criminals are still living in Canada as a result of entire units that came en masse through Halifax into our country in the 1940s, and that Canada knew at the time who they were. Mr. Rambam interviewed 72 out of a list of 1,000 suspected Nazis living in Canada, and he sent his findings to authorities who did not act. He called it a stain on the history of Canada. Sound familiar? We are currently under siege by radical Islamists whose stated objective is to conquer the West and establish a third caliphate. More than 180 Canadians have been identified by CSIS as having left Canada to become ISIS fighters and are now finding their way back into the country. Now, the Criminal Code of Canada makes it an offense to leave the country to join a terrorist group, so why aren't they being prosecuted? Matthew Schreier wrote in his recently published book, A Dawn Prayer, about escaping from a Syrian prison in 2012, where he was interrogated by 3 Canadian terrorists who are now back home living freely among us. According to Schreier, the RCMP have a mountain of evidence with which to prosecute these 3 individuals, yet to date, no action has been taken. And what about our latest returnee, who was interviewed by the New York Times and the CBC and is currently residing in Oakville after having admitted that he actively participated in ISIS executions? The stain on the history of Canada has not been erased. In fact, it is a part of a pattern of inaction and indifference on the part of our government, which fails to address the violent criminal actions of those traitors and continues to adhere to the mantra of, let's dispose of the past as soon as possible. Only the past now includes the present as well. Shame on those in power for their cowardice and poor choices. As the famous economist Dr. Thomas Sowell said, the most basic question is not what is best, but who shall decide what is best. I think most of us know just exactly what our problem here in Canada is in this regard. And his name is Justin Trudeau.